A decade after the Trojan War, every great Greek hero has returned home, except one. Somewhere beyond the edge of the known world, Odysseus is trapped between angry gods, deadly monsters, impossible temptations, and the endless sea. His struggle to return home will become one of the greatest adventures ever told. This is the complete story of Homer's Odyssey. We open not with Odysseus, but with the mess he's left behind. 10 years after the fall of Troy, Odysseus, the cunning king of Ithaca, still hasn't come home. His household has fallen apart. More than 100 suitors have taken over his palace, eating his livestock, drinking his wine, and pressuring his wife Penelope to give up on him and marry one of them instead. Penelope, clever and fiercely loyal, has been stalling them for years with a trick. She claims she'll choose a husband once she finishes weaving a burial shroud for her father-in-law, then secretly unravels her work every night so it's never done. Meanwhile, Odysseus and Penelope's son, Telemachus, has grown up entirely in his father's shadow, watching strangers pillage his home and too uncertain of himself to do anything about it. The goddess Athena, protector of wisdom and warfare, and Odysseus's constant divine ally, decides it's finally time to intervene. Disguised as an old family friend, she visits Telemachus and pushes him to act. Call a public assembly, confront the suitors, and go abroad to learn what actually happened to his father. Telemachus takes her advice. He sails first to Pylos, where the aged King Nestor, a veteran of Troy full of long war stories, offers warmth but no solid news. He continues on to Sparta, where King Menelaus and his wife Helen, the same Helen whose abduction sparked the Trojan War a decade earlier, host him generously and finally deliver something useful. Odysseus is alive, but trapped on a distant island, held there by the nymph Calypso. While Telemachus is away, the suitors, furious at his sudden confidence, secretly plot an ambush to kill him on his way home. Meanwhile, far from Ithaca, Odysseus has spent years stranded on an island from which even a legendary hero cannot escape. With Telemachus's journey established, the scene shifts to Calypso's island, and we finally meet the poem's hero directly. Calypso, a beautiful nymph, has kept Odysseus there for 7 years as her reluctant lover, and he spends his days staring out at the sea, longing for home. The gods step in once more. Zeus orders Calypso to release him, and Odysseus builds a raft and sets out alone. Poseidon, god of the sea, spots him and wrecks the raft in a violent storm. Odysseus barely survives, washing up naked and exhausted on the shore of Scheria, home to the Phaeacians. There, the young princess Nausicaa discovers him while doing laundry with her attendants, helps him get cleaned up, and brings him to her father's palace, where King Alcinous offers him full hospitality before even learning his name. At a royal feast that evening, Odysseus finally reveals who he is, and the story flashes back to tell his own account of everything that happened between leaving Troy and washing up on this beach 10 years later. He describes a raid on the land of the Sicons that goes badly, costing him men before he's even properly begun the voyage home. Next come the Lotus Eaters, whose enchanted fruit erases any desire to return home. When a few of his men taste it, Odysseus has to physically drag them back to the ships. Then follows the most famous episode of the whole epic, the land of the Cyclops, one-eyed giants. Odysseus and a scouting party get trapped inside the cave of Polyphemus, a Cyclops who begins eating the men two at a time. Odysseus gets him drunk on wine, blinds his single eye with a sharpened stake while he sleeps, and slips his surviving men out by hiding them under the bellies of Polyphemus's sheep. Sailing away safely, Odysseus can't resist shouting his real name back at the wounded giant to claim credit for the trick. A flash of pride that costs him dearly. Because Polyphemus turns out to be Poseidon's son, giving the sea god a personal reason to hunt Odysseus for the rest of his journey. The wandering continues from there. The wind god Aeolus gifts Odysseus a sealed bag containing every dangerous storm wind, which would have carried the fleet safely home. But his own curious crew opens it just as Ithaca comes into view, and the winds roar back out and blow them far off course again. They next land among the Laestrygonians, giant cannibals who hurl boulders and destroy nearly the entire fleet, leaving Odysseus with only a single ship. That last ship reaches Aea, home of the sorceress Circe, who turns half of Odysseus's men into pigs with an enchanted potion. With help from the god Hermes, who gives him a protective herb, Odysseus resists her magic himself and compels her to restore his men. No longer an enemy, Circe becomes his ally, and they remain together on her island for a year before his men finally persuade him to continue the journey home. Before he can continue his voyage, Circe tells Odysseus that only one place holds the answers he needs, the realm of the dead, where he speaks with the spirits of the dead, including the blind prophet Tiresias, who warns him about the dangers still waiting ahead, and about the self-control he'll need once he finally reaches home. He also meets the ghost of his own mother, who died grieving his absence, and several former comrades from the war at Troy. Armed with Tiresias's warning, Odysseus returns to the world of the living, but the dangers ahead are only growing more deadly. Odysseus sails past the Sirens, whose songs lure passing sailors to their deaths on the rocks. He has his men plug their ears with wax while he alone listens, lashed to the mast, so he can hear the song without steering the ship toward ruin. He then threads a narrow strait between Scylla, a six-headed monster fixed in her cave, and Charybdis, a deadly whirlpool on the opposite shore, losing 6 men to Scylla in the crossing. Finally, against every warning from Tiresias and Circe alike, his exhausted and starving crew slaughters the sun god's sacred cattle on the island of Thrinacia, while Odysseus is asleep. The gods punish this violation with a storm that shatters the ship and drowns every man aboard except Odysseus, who drifts alone for days until he washes ashore on Calypso's island, which is exactly where his own account catches up to where the poem first began. Odysseus's tale finally catches up to the present. Deeply moved by everything Odysseus has described, the Phaeacians load him with treasure and sail him home to Ithaca themselves, finally delivering him to solid ground after 20 years away from everything he knows. At last, Odysseus is actually home. Once home, Odysseus doesn't walk straight into his own palace. Athena disguises him as an elderly beggar so he can quietly assess the danger first, and she guides him to the hut of Eumaeus, his loyal swineherd, who welcomes the disguised stranger with genuine hospitality. Having no idea it's his own long-lost master standing in front of him. Telemachus, now safely home from his own journey, reunites with his father here at the hut, and Athena briefly lifts the disguise so the two can recognize each other and quietly plan their next move together. Back at the palace, Odysseus, still in disguise, endures insults and casual cruelty from the suitors, who have no idea who they're mocking. His old dog, Argus, recognizes him instantly after 20 years and dies moments later, as though he'd simply been waiting for this. Inside, his elderly nurse Eurycleia washes the beggar's feet and recognizes a childhood scar on his leg. Odysseus grabs her and swears her to secrecy before she can give him away to the household. Penelope, still not fully convinced the beggar could really be her husband, sets one last test for the suitors. She'll marry whichever man can string Odysseus's great bow and shoot an arrow cleanly through a row of 12 axe heads, a feat only Odysseus himself has ever managed. One suitor after another fails even to bend the bow. Then the disguised beggar asks for a turn. The suitors mock the idea, but he strings the bow with ease and makes the shot. With that signal, the trap springs shut. Odysseus throws off his disguise, and together with Telemachus and 2 loyal servants, turns the bow on the suitors instead, cutting them down as they scramble for weapons that have already been quietly hidden away. Even after the slaughter, Penelope still hesitates to fully believe this exhausted, blood-spattered stranger is truly her husband after 20 years apart. She sets one final, private test, mentioning offhand that she'll have their marriage bed moved out of their bedroom. Odysseus reacts with genuine outrage, because he built that bed himself around a living olive tree rooted in the ground, and it cannot be moved without destroying it. A detail only the real Odysseus could possibly know. Convinced at last, Penelope embraces him, and years of guarded waiting finally give way. The poem closes with Odysseus reunited with his aging father, Laertes, and a brief final uprising from the suitors' grieving families, which Athena herself steps in to end, restoring lasting peace to Ithaca. Beneath its monsters, magic, and divine intervention, the Odyssey is ultimately a story about perseverance, identity, and the longing for home. After 20 years of war and wandering, Odysseus succeeds not because he is the strongest hero, but because he endures, adapts, and never loses sight of where he belongs. Nearly 3,000 years after it was first told, Homer's epic continues to inspire readers with its timeless exploration of courage, resilience, and the enduring hope of finding our way home.